Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. And Daniel, good to see you.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
We're doing well here and anxious to do another program for our viewers. And this is something that's in the news, even though it's old news. And that has to do with what the position is of the administration on how many nukes we need to be safe. And the story came out today because there was news about, it was sort of a continuation of the back and forth between Tillerson and Trump. Who's telling the truth about what went on in that meeting in July when all the military people got along, and who said who was, the moron, and who had the highest, now it's who has the highest IQ. He goes on and on. Well, we'd like to try to talk about some more serious things about it, because there are some serious things. But the story that broke was that information coming out from that meeting in July, released to NBC, that Trump had asked for 10 times as many nuclear weapons as we had. And he didn't like that. He says, that's fake news, and they better watch out. They might not get their license renewed. And at least that's in the news. So it's back and forth on this. But the big thing is who's telling the truth about these weapons, and why is Trump upset? His position has been very clear, a position we didn't like, but it was clear. He always said we need to beef up the nuclear arsenal. It might be that he isn't for 10 times. Maybe it's fake news because he only wants it 7 times. Who knows what's going on? So it is back and forth. But I do want to read a quote off the screen here in a second about Trump, before he was president. And he was rather clear about what his position was. And he said that we should greatly expand the nuclear arsenal. And this should be of his first order. Do you have here we go, we have it now. Here, this is Trump. It was after he was elected, but before he was sworn in. The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Well, that may be a long wait, but no, he's not been bashful. Matter of fact, he's made statements that have been stronger than that. He said that project is of first order, and he did issue some type of an executive order to show how strongly he felt about this. And money didn't seem to be a problem, because it's national security and safety. But this, of course, was a result of a meeting that I thought maybe we'd get more information from about what they're thinking militarily. What are they going to do with Iran? And that didn't come out. But it's interesting that 2 months later, here we are talking about who said what about a moron, and how much did Trump actually want to expand? Obviously, if they said, if they could have had news that Trump has a reasonable position and he's sticking to his promises in the campaign, and he wants to upgrade and expand the nuclear power and give the reason. But no, it was, 10 times more than ever, made it a big deal. And of course, that was the temptation. And we did then see the response from Trump to say, no, that's a lie, and they better watch out. So it sort of deteriorates so often.
I think there are a few things that we can take from this little mini tempest in a teapot. First of all, Trump is right about some things. He's right that there have been many leaks from inside his White House to discredit him, designed to discredit him. That's a fact. The other fact we know is that the media colludes with these leakers in a way to present everything Trump says in the worst possible light. The reason why NBC leaked this, if it's indeed true, is to show that President Trump is unhinged. He wants all of these nukes, and that other people think he's a moron for wanting to do it. So they do have a motivation. The media has a motivation to do it. But your main point and our main point is this is beside the point. Because in fact, he doesn't oppose greatly expanding our nuclear capacity.
His position.
It is his position.
Yeah, And you know, the whole thing is his position is a very bipartisan position. It supports the establishment. It supports the deep state. It supports the Democratic leadership, the Republican leadership. If you look at all the military spending, it's always bipartisan. And you know, there is a story out just recently about a $1.5 trillion 30-year plan for this nuclear buildup. And who started that? Obama.
Yes.
He initiated it, but the administration and the Congress is following through and providing, you know, the early funds for that. But $1.5 trillion over 30 years, who knows where the world's going to be in 30 years. But for now, it's sort of a blank check for the military-industrial complex. But nobody's saying, you know, isn't this too much? But I do want to read a few of the things that they're getting ready to do. And this is in spite of the fact that there is a general a few years ago that was assistant to the chief of staff, and he was arguing we don't even need ICBMs and we would be everybody safe. But that was his position. But that's not the position of what's going on with this $1.5 trillion program. This is what they want to do. The enormous extravagant program is designed to produce 80 new nuclear warheads every year.
Wow. Including
3 new warhead types, a new $20 billion nuclear-armed long-range standoff weapon, a new $12 billion B-61 nuclear gravity bomb, which they've already been testing, and a new fleet of nuclear-armed submarines, and a new $100 billion intercontinental ballistic missile. Well, they didn't listen to the previous general, said we probably don't even need it. That's a lot of weaponry. I'm predicting that they'll never have enough money to do this, because it's this kind of stuff that's going to drive us toward the bankruptcy that will make this prohibitive and, you know, bring us to our knees, just as the system failed in the Soviet system, both their foreign adventurism as well as their failed economic policy. But this is grandiose, and it's a bipartisan deal. So I wished we'd have some people wake up. And you can't just write it off and say, well, it's Trump. Trump's, you know, he's a, you know, this and that.
Yeah.
And no, it was Obama. He started all of this. But, you know, the presidents have a lot of power. They're supposed to be, you know, the commander in chief. They're not supposed to start the wars, initiate the war. But who's really responsible for this? I go back a step further. Congress should be held accountable. They're the ones who really can rein in this type of nonsense, which finally occurs when it gets, you know, so outlandish, like the Congress, you know, reined in the Vietnam War. So it's the Congress, but the Congress is a reflection of the people. If the people were upset about this, you know, maybe they'd send enough message and say, hey, you know what? Let's end the war in Afghanistan. We don't need that. So the people need to be awakened. The Congress needs to assume responsibility. Of course, if we had better presidents, they could be standing up against this. But this, there's a lot of policy stuff going on here. But what do we hear? This back and forth between who's the moron, whose IQ is what, and threatening people with maybe you're going to lose your license.
And you can bet that $1.5 trillion is just a down payment on this program. You know, it's funny, we're building all of these nukes, yet everyone has a panic attack when North Korea fires some junky old missile out into the ocean or something, you know.
Yeah, I keep thinking about how much they worry. When I was in the military in the 60s, we and the Soviets had 30,000 each, and we worried about that, and I thought it was justifiable. Now we spend more time worrying about the nukes that people don't have, you know, whether it's Iran or whether it's North Korea. But we do spend a lot of time on issues that have to be really boosted to intimidate and build fear in our people.
And this is the real takeaway that we're trying to do in the show, which is that the media wants to focus on Trump being a buffoon, but the reality is this is a massive corporate welfare program that neither of the parties disagree with. All of the contracts that are going out, and you talked about a few of them earlier, massive contracts. They're going to rebuild the national nuclear labs, Los Alamos and the others. Huge infusion of money, huge infusion of jobs. This is corporate welfare at its worst. It's disguising itself as defense policy, and it's not defense policy at all.
You know, Reagan had a way of of dramatizing this, and he had a slogan which sounded, very good, but I think when you dissect it out, it was just a politer way of saying some of these things, because his policy was peace through strength. Who doesn't want peace and who doesn't want strength? But it was also a justification to build, a lot of weapons and things and not deal with the policies of non-intervention and bringing troops home. The policies that we're following now, supported in a bipartisan way, it's almost, instead of peace through strength, it's war through threatens, through intimidations and things. I think it's flipped. So it's not, it's more likely, to have an accident along the way, or an unintended consequence, or a blowback incident, or, something happened that will take us into war, because sometimes people have all these weapons, they want to test them. We've heard that story too. What do we do? What do we have these for if we don't use them? It looked like that was the reason that a huge non-nuclear bomb was dropped on Afghanistan, and we've got to see if it's going to work.
Yeah. The other thing, that we like to point out hypocrisy, and there sure is plenty of it. But the idea that maybe it's not 10 times, as you said, maybe it's 8 times as many nukes. We have a chart here of the new U.S. nuclear arsenal, if we can put it up, and see what's happened since the peak at 30,000. You can see different points in history, and it has precipitously declined. And this coincides, generally speaking, with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that the U.S. signed, along with many other countries in the world. And so an increase to reverse this trend is technically goes against the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. We always like to talk about other countries being in violation of the treaty. For example, Iran, even when it hasn't been in violation. But in fact, if the U.S. is to pursue this strategy, it violates Article 6 of the treaty. And it's fairly short. I'll read just a part of it. But this is a direct violation if we're expanding our nuclear arsenal. Each of the parties to the treaty undertakes to pursue negotiations in good faith on effective measures relating to a cessation of the nuclear arms race at an early date and to nuclear disarmament. So we need to be moving down to here, not going up to here, if we're going to keep to the treaty.
Yeah, this whole idea that everything depends on numbers, everything, from my viewpoint, depends on policy and how we get along with people. And if we're doing well with communications and trade, then that diminishes the, the chance of breaking out a war. And some of our closer allies and friends, they have nuclear weapons, and we're not on pins and needles. So it's policy that really counts. But during the Cold War, and that I had a position which I sort of was a little bit flippant about it, but more I think about it, it wasn't all that bad, because I never quite bought into the triad, submarines and land missiles and old-fashioned bombers, the old-fashioned, ships and aircraft carriers that we build just for the sake of the military-industrial complex, or commit aggression. That's what we need those for. But, if we had a country that was really capable of threatening us, which the Soviets were capable of doing, I often thought, the nuclear submarine, and we've been very good at developing nuclear submarines. They were the quietest in the world. Yeah. I don't know if that's the case, but and they can be, they can carry nuclear missiles. And if anybody ever dared try to do anything, I believe that defense mechanism of having the submarines, that would tell people, you better not mess around. I don't think you have to be bombastic or anything else, but it sure would save a lot of money, and I think cut down a lot of chances of accident happening. But so I would argue the case that maybe a few submarines wouldn't be such a bad idea. But all this other stuff that I just read off that they want, that's pure welfareism, and it has nothing to do with national defense and safety and peace. I think it's all a gimmick to fool the people. But then you always have to have an enemy, and that's why we have to get those terrorists.
Yeah, get those terrorists, get the Ruskies. So my final word on this really would be the idea that Trump is somehow the only one guilty because of what he may or may not have said in July is a farce, as we've said throughout the show, because this is a bipartisan. When Trump told Congress, hey, I need $54 billion more for defense, they said, come on, we're going to give you 70 at least, You need some more, you need some more. So the whole idea that they're playing coy with this is just farcical.
Right. And there's a real reason for this, is because all the weapons are built not in one or two industrialized states. You always get parts in every state. You know, even the F-35 is built in just about every state in the country. So the lobbyists just go, and if you don't vote for it, you're voting against jobs. So there's military Keynesianism. Conservatives generally condemn Keynesianism of make work jobs, but that's what the military is all about. And they say, well, what would happen? Well, maybe they would be working in a productive industry and do things that would help increase the standard of living of the people, and not just you know, pretend that we're becoming a wealthier country. Because when you build an aircraft carrier, that increases the GDP. But what if you're in the middle class and you're struggling for getting and paying for medical care and other things and education? Wealth leaves the country, and there's no increase in wealth when you put your money into this. Yes, you should have national defense, but it shouldn't be astronomical. And what I see coming is something similar to what happened to the Soviet system. I see the collapse of this coming, and most people don't want to concentrate on military spending because they get conned into believing that if you vote against $1, you're un-American. Well, I think there's room out there for being very strongly patriotic and pro-American by saying that you can do a lot better with a lot less spending and a lot better policy, and decide that maybe bringing troops home, pay to bring them home, and let it be at that. If that were the case, if they had been following this policy, believe me, we wouldn't even be talking about North Korea right now. That wouldn't even have been an issue, and we would have saved $1 trillion or $2 trillion since 1950. Policy is what counts, and the principles of liberty is what counts, and therefore we have to get more people to understand this and make sure they send a message to those members of Congress so they can put the brakes on the presidents when they get out of hand. That's the way Vietnam ended, but why don't we use that same technique to stop it, to stop the wasteful spending and stop our military from being in 120 countries just looking for a fight? That is the way we can achieve peace and prosperity, and what we should strive for. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.